students. Thank you for being here with me today, even though today for me is a Monday. Maybe you're watching this on a different day. Unions today. So we learned why we have unions. Let's talk about how active unions are today. Are unions strong today or are unions weak today? I don't know. Actually, I do know. Let's take a look. Unions had been very strong in the US, and then all of that changed. They had been strong, then they stopped being strong. Why doesn't every workplace have a union? It's good for workers. There are two kinds of unions. Public sector unions, if you work for the state or federal government, like teachers, police, and the FBI, and private sector workers, private sector unions, if you work for a private company like Boeing, Starbucks, Microsoft, or Amazon. This chart shows how union membership has changed slightly in the US over the last several years. If I say the last several years, it might be up to 10 or 12 years, not 50 years. That's not several years. I usually think of several as 7, but it could be 10. Okay. So this chart shows how union membership has changed slightly in the US over the last several years. Are more workers members of public sector unions or private sector unions? Okay. This is the percentage of public workers who work getting their money from the government who belong to a union. So it was in 2009, about 48% of public workers belonged to a union. And in 38% belonged to a union. And then in 2019, roughly 33% of workers belonged to a union. So the number of union workers has decreased since 2009. That's still like 1 out of 3. So if there's 3 government workers, or who get paid from the government, if there's 3, 1 belongs to a union and 2 don't belong to a union. Conversely, on the other hand, look at this one. Private sector unions like at Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, how many private sector workers belong to a union? In 2009, about 8% of private sector workers belonged to a union, and that dropped down to about 7% of private sector workers belong to a union. So there has been a slight drop right there, slight drop. As you can see, slight drop in union membership among private sector workers. Okay. More people had belonged to private sector workers until the 1950s. At that time, many private business owners were starting to be anti-union. You can see that decrease here. So this chart is going to be union membership between 1930 and 2014. Let's focus on the private sector unions. This chart shows 1930. They started before, a long time before this, but this is notable. This is when our chart starts. A huge increase until about 1953 or 1954. And then we have had a steady decrease in private sector unions. Here is the public sector unions. They're just measuring it from 1980. We have had public sector unions before 1980, but it's showing what happened. There was a huge increase. Then for some reason there's nothing here, and then it fluctuates up and down, but it's slightly down. This goes until 2010. But what I'm interested is what happened here. Well, private businesses started not liking unions, and the government started not liking unions. Why? I have one reason why here. There's probably many reasons. I'm not a specialist on this. I'm just giving you one reason. Actually, maybe two reasons. In addition to business owners being anti-union, some members of governments were anti-union too. The problem, or I should put one problem, was that in the 1940s to the late 1950s, the U.S. was experiencing the Red Scare. The Red Scare, which means that they were afraid of communism. And unions represented communism to many powerful people. So the word communism would mean workers and all people have rights to have a living wage. That would be one way of looking at communism. Unions represented communism, and during the 1940s and 1950s, maybe until 1962 or 63, maybe even until 1970, Americans were very afraid of Russia and China. They were afraid of communism. And unions represented communism to many powerful people. Here is a magazine cover showing Uncle Sam, the symbol of America, steering clear of communist countries. So what this shows us is this is America. And if we're not careful, we will become like East Germany or North Korea, Poland, Hungary, or China. So he has to steer clear of communism. He has to avoid it. So that's one of the reasons why unions decreased. It was around this time that we had the Red Scare, and then union membership decreased. What happened in those days, which you will study if you take U.S. history, is American people started looking at other Americans and saying, "You're a communist, you lose your job." So many people in Hollywood and many famous people, some newspaper people, journalists, they lost their job because other people said that they were communists. It was a crazy time. Now we're looking at income inequality. One of the results of not having strong union membership is growing income inequality. We use the term income inequality when we talk about how the money is divided among all of the people in a country. So you take all of the people and you take all of the money here. How much of this money do the richest people have? Do the second richest, the third richest, the fourth richest, and the poor people? How much money do they have if you take all of the money in a country? We use the term income inequality when we talk about how the money is divided among all the people in a country. The top income earners get a lot of money. There is income inequality in the United States. We can see income inequality in this chart here. As union membership, this is the title of the chart. As union membership has fallen, the top 10% have been getting a larger share of income. This is the title of the newspaper article. This is from 1917 until 2014. So if we look at this, in 1920, the top 10%, the blue line is the top 10% of people. Ooh. The top 10% means the richest top 10% of people in the United States. So if there's 100 people, I'm going to choose the 10 people who have the most money. Are they continuing to get most of the money? So in 1920, the top 10% of people earned 40% of all of the money in America. So 10 people get 40% of the money. 90 people get 60% of the money. That was the case in 1920. Then in 2014, this is 2014, the top 10% of people get 47.2% of the money. How much do union members get? Well, at the very beginning, today in 2014, union members got 11.1% of all of the money in America. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say that right. I'm sorry. Forget what I just said. It's not about how much money they got. 11.1% of Americans are union members. So if only 11.1% of Americans are union members, and the top 10% gets 47.2% of the money. In let's say 1945 to 1960, about 28% of the people were union members, and that meant the rich people got less money. The more unions you have, the less money the richest people in the country get. That's what it shows us. Sorry about that. This explains it better. This chart shows us that 11.1% of all Americans belonged to a union in 2014, while a full 47.2% of all income went to the top 10% of all Americans. Do you understand that? Again, this means how many people belong to a union, the percentage is 11.1, and how much money goes to the richest people, the top 10%, would be almost half of all the money goes to the top 10%, and very few people are union members. The more union membership you have, the less money goes to the top 10%. The more union membership you have, the less money goes to the top 10%. Compare these percentages to the percentages in 1945, when approximately 30% of all Americans belonged to a union, and the top 10% of Americans got 30% of the income. So I said here, the year's 1945, 30% of Americans belonged to a union, and the top 10% of people took home 30% of all the money. However, in 2014, 11% of Americans belonged to a union, approximately 11.1, and the top 10% in 2014 took home 47% of the money. That's a big change. All in all, what do you think? Would you join a union? If you don't know the answer, look at the comparison between the pay of union and non-union workers here. So if you work for a union, in 2018, your average pay was about $30 an hour. If you don't work for a union, your average pay is just over $25 an hour. And this has been all the time. Now, I don't know why they don't have any different money here, but you can clearly see that union workers earn more than non-union workers. I hope that this is clear to understand. What we're going to do next is we're going to be writing about charts, which is going to be super important for you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.